So I see our speakers turned on their camera. They're still muted, but they're ready. And it's 5:30 sharp. I suggest that we start this first lecture series in 2020. I'm super happy that we have Michael Lustenberger and Florian Spychiger from ZHAW today here with us, sharing their expertise in the field of applications of blockchain in the supply chain. They will give us a general overview and then talk specifically about one Innosuisse product they did with a regional label. They will introduce themselves when they start their lecture. I'm super happy that we can host this lecture series online. It's a joint project of TrustSquare, University of Zurich Blockchain Center, and Decentrum. It's the first lecture in 2020. We did already a few in 2019, and there is more lectures planned. If you want to be up to date about the lectures, I would recommend you to subscribe to the TrustSquare newsletter or follow TrustSquare on social media. Also on the website of TrustSquare, there's always announcement when the lecture series are held. Hopefully we can do the next one at the new location at Paradeplatz. But I would say that this live video setup is great, especially in times where I would say the offering of evening events is not that great. And I think it's a great alternative to Netflix or anything else. So I hope all of you are settled in, you have a cool beer or a glass of water, and are ready for the lecture series. A few technical details as well. So I mentioned that earlier. It's the first time for us to hold this lecture in such a setup. So please bear with us. Also help our lecturers to go through this lecture. It's difficult to speak to your computer and not to our audience. If you have questions, you can use the hand raise functionality. You can see that in the bottom of your screen. And one of the lecturers will put your audio on so you can put or ask your question directly in the talk. There's also some time reserved after the talk for a general Q&A session. So you can also write it down or leave it in the F&A section. Then we can go through that once the lecture is over. I hope I answered all the questions you had. And with that, I would like to give the word to Michael and Florian. And I'm super excited to hear what you have to share with us today. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Malik. I hope everybody hears me well from home to your home. We are super glad to have this opportunity too. Yes, we have some experience lately done as the university moved also to digital and virtual, but still, as Malik said, it's quite strange not to talk to an audience, but just to a computer. Nevertheless, we are happy for this opportunity to present our research and to give you a short introduction or a short view on our research about applications in blockchain, specifically in supply chains. As Malik said, my name is Michael Lustenberger. I'm a research associate of the Center of Organizational Viability at the Zurich University of Applied Science. We are located normally in Winterthur, but as many of us, we are currently working from home. And I think Florian will present, you will present yourself quickly, no?
Yes, thank you, Michael. So also hello from my side. Thank you, Malik, for the introduction and the setup. I'm also very happy to present today. I'm also working together with Michael in the same team at the ZHAW, Zurich University of Applied Science, the Center for Organizational Viability, where we are mostly looking into blockchain applications for enterprises, for companies in their supply chains. Besides that, I'm also doing a PhD at the University of Zurich, also in the University of Zurich Blockchain Center.
So, okay, let's go into the topic, what we will go through today. Into the agenda, we will first give a look into supply chain management in general and the challenges, problems and solutions which are currently discussed in supply chain generally. It's more a theoretical perspective because especially me, I'm coming more from the supply chain side and less from the technical side. So I'm a classical supply chain manager before, and now I'm a researcher in supply chain management. After we will have a look into our studies we made and our findings, then we will have an outlook what we are currently looking into in future research projects. And as we said, at the end, we will have time for also some discussion and questions. So if you look into supply chains and especially what they have challenged, what the challenge they have in the current digital age, we can see that in the literature it's many times mentioned that we have problems into the visibility and the traceability. There are many problems also in automating intercompany processes. There are many times insufficient exchange of information, and they are currently fighting to have a unique truth. What is actually the current truth of a status of a shipment or a state of production or whatever you want to share over a whole supply chain. Many times it's also because there are far too many intermediates between all the different links. So you don't even know who is the supplier of the supplier of the supplier and so on. I mean, you have supply chains which have up to 13 tiers, as we said, which is quite deep then. So you don't know exactly who is behind all the material you're actually sourcing. Many companies are realizing that now in the Corona time. Now they believe they're sourcing in Europe, and from one moment to the other, they're realizing that actually the supplier of the supplier is from China, because they also have problems if they're sourcing, as it's not anymore delivered their products. So the reason behind that, if you look into the literature, to make it short, you can find actually 4 reasons. Many times it's because there is a power and information asymmetry. So, I mean, if some company has an asymmetry, more power and more information than others, for sure they will not share it because it's actually to their benefit. So this is actually then limiting the willingness to share information, because you believe, or companies believing, that they are taking advantage of this asymmetry. So they will not share this because it would be killing their business, or it would be killing their profit. Many times you can go also into that there is a lack of standards internationally, globally, so it's difficult to find the right standards for creating shared data throughs. The link is missing, or the interfaces are missing. And many times also smaller companies especially are suffering from knowledge or skill lack. So they don't have the right knowledge or the right skills to find the right way in a digital age to share information. Florian, will take over?
Yes, well, thanks. So, yeah, as Michael introduced to you the challenges, especially in the information exchange in supply chains, as most of you probably know, there has been many people that said that blockchains can help to counteract these challenges. So especially, I would say, 4 qualities of blockchains, or 4 properties of blockchains could help, or at least the literature says so, to overcome the issues in the current information flow in supply chains. So just as a quick overview, as probably most of you know, blockchains provide immutability. So once the data is recorded, you cannot change it anymore, which gives you an auditable track record of information. Also, blockchains can increase transparency. Each participant stores a copy of the ledger, and so the whole transaction history is visible, which increases transparency, visibility across the supply chain. As for the challenge of the intermediaries, blockchains provide this intermediation because they are decentralized. So you have a decentralized system which has some consensus rules that leads to in the end that you have one single truth instead of many different databases across companies. And smart contracts can be deployed in blockchains to automate several processes without the need of a central entity. So let me see whether I can go to the next slide. Yes. So this is more or less the baseline that you can find in literature. So there are some challenges in supply chains, and blockchains can provide some benefits to that identified by a large body of scientific literature. However, this is more the theoretical aspect, and because we are applied scientists, we want to look into what this technology can really do in supply chains, and we formulated a few research questions. So where the blockchain technology can indeed help overcome these supply chain challenges and add some value to a business network. What benefits can be generated for supply chains and its stakeholders? Are they better off? And if you have a supply chain ecosystem, so not just a chain, rather a network, what do you need, or which parties do you need to involve, and what are the role of these parties? So this is the starting point for our research. And now I hand over to Michael again.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, some technical issues. So here back again. Yeah, when we go back to the general models we find in supply chains or in supply chain management, when we talk about exchange of information, we can find three models. There's the model one, which we called the information transfer model. This model is actually built on the idea that one entity brings or provides all information to another entity in the supply chain. So they're both in the same supply chain, if you so want. So, and then this entity is hosting the information system. Another model, because you maybe don't trust an entity in your own supply chain, as I said, because of the information asymmetry and the power asymmetry. Maybe you don't want to share information within your own supply chain with one party. So then the second model would keep the idea that actually a third party is doing that for the whole supply chain. So you have a third party who is doing this information system and keeping all the data and trying to analyze the data and providing the information to the correspondent party in the supply chain. These two models are quite used in the supply chain management, and they're often used because you realize that you need somehow a so-called supply chain tower. It's an SCT, as we so call it. It's a supply chain tower which is used to provide the information to the right party at the right moment. Many companies are also doing that now and studying now how they can build up such supply chain towers. A third model, which is quite interesting, is the third one, which is an information hub model, where actually you think about an independent information system which is hosted by all together, and all supply chain parties are bringing on the same time their information into this independent system. So this system wouldn't be dependent on one single party, but is hosted together. So far, we have not even seen that in generally spoken. So that is where we start our research and think, okay, maybe blockchain could be the technology to provide such kind of system, which are where the entity together, all the supply chain parties together, are hosting together a system. Why this is so crucial? You see a quote below, and you see that many times there would be a need for a common platform actually for making more efficient the flow of information, and then also the flow of, for example, here timber. But the issue is many times that the involved parties are not really willing to share and are resisting to build up such a platform because they don't want to share the information with one or another party in the supply chain. So the question is there if maybe such a system would be more trustworthy, let's say, and the companies would more trust such a system and would more share information if they know that not another entity, even if it's one in the own supply chain or the third party, would host the information for them. So to make a summary, we can see that many times there is a lack of information exchange because there's a lack of trust between the parties, and there's a lack of resources, maybe also because some companies have not the sufficient IT skills and knowledge to build up such a system. There we had also a look into how these different kind of models solve these two problems. So we have the classical supply chain tower, where one company is hosting all data, and there we see that many times it's a problem of the trust. So you don't trust this company if in your own supply chain, so you don't want to share information with these towers, in generally spoken, as long as this supply chain tower is not forcing you to share. Many times it's also that the problem. So the focal company in a supply chain, let's say Nestle, Adidas, and all the big ones, they can force their supplier to bring all the data into their supply chain tower. What is solved in this situation is the resource problem, because the smaller companies, they don't need to provide a lot of IT knowledge. They just have to provide the data. In the third-party model, as we said it, or the tower as a service model, here we have partially solved trust because it's a third party. It's not anymore a party which actually is in the supply chain who is hosting this information system, and so you should have at least more trust in this third party entity. What is also solved is the resource issue, because the third party is actually bearing all the costs and resource risk. What we were looking now into the blockchain, you see there that currently, yes, you can solve the trust problem because you have a distributed control over it, and you have maybe even a peripheral control over your data. What is a little bit an issue here is that the resources, you still need a lot of IT knowledge, and you have to build up even maybe systems. If we talk about permissioned blockchain, you need to build up the system and to build up all the IT infrastructure, and also to keep it maintained after. There we said it could be, it's one of our hypotheses that we could say there could be that startups can bridge this, and then the startups are functioning like a tower, or like as a service solution, blockchain as a service solution here. So they bear the risk of building up the system and to keep it maintained, but still try to keep the trust distributed. But actually there we would need to go into detail and to see how these startups are really built up, and if at the end are really using blockchain in this way. What we see many times, if you go in details, that they move actually to this side. So the startups and somewhere here, is that at the end of the day, it's more a classical tower as a service solution, and not anymore really related to this distributed trust. Florian?
Okay, thank you. So now we also did some hands-on studies because we wanted to see how this all works in practice and together with companies. So I will present you some of the results and findings of studies that we did together with companies. Okay, so the first project we did with some students and together with a big pharma company was set up a prototype for a pharma supply chain. Here, the pharma company had some problems in their supply chain. So basically, you see the whole supply chain here. As in many supply chains, one of the problems, but this is a digitization problem, is that documentation is still paper-based. What else you have is that you have no end-to-end information. So the adjacent tiers or adjacent companies, they know they have information from each other, but there is no overarching information exchange framework in this supply chain. And you have many manual processes also related to the paper-based documentation in this supply chain. So we tried to see whether blockchain can help in this situation or can help to overcome these problems of the pharma company. And we implemented a blockchain prototype based on Hyperledger Fabric, which provided a blockchain layer where all the participants can add data, get data, exchange their data, can also check certificates, whether those are the original certificates that they get delivered by mail, for example, because they store a hash on the blockchain. Then you can also track shipments with a small Raspberry Pi. It's kind of similar to the modem, what modem does. So this is just a small Raspberry Pi that you can add to a shipment, which measures the temperature, and in case of a violation, it will just write it to a smart contract. So this was the first prototype or project we did together with a pharma company to really try to integrate the information flow within their supply chain. Because it's quite a big company, we opted for Hyperledger Fabric. There are not too many companies in their supply chain. They are quite well known. Then the next project was similar, but the setting is quite different. It is a small regional label, so a label that certifies products from Switzerland or even from a region, actually from Zürich Oberland. So they certify the producers that they really produce regional ham, for example, or regional cheese. And here you see their supply chain depicted. So usually the tracking of those products is not a problem until the products get disassembled. Then the trace is lost. Also, as I said, only the producers are certified. It's not really a certification on a product level. The auditing process can be costly. There is an auditor that needs to go physically to these different producers, even though they are just doing mostly document checking. It's not that they are checking how the products are produced, rather they are just checking documents about the origin of the products. And similar to the pharma supply chain, you don't have end-to-end information flow. So in this case, we also implemented a blockchain prototype, but we opted for a public blockchain in this case because there are many small entities involved, and so we decided to build a prototype based on Ethereum, where a user can register an asset. So this could be a cow or maybe milk, and then the asset can be transferred to another user, to another producer, can be produced. For example, ham can be produced, and this will split up the asset, create new child assets, and create again a trace along the supply chain, such that in the end, you could, for example, via a QR code, see what is the origin of steak, for example. Also here, this prototype was on Ethereum, so an immutable public infrastructure that we used here. So those were the two pilot projects we did together with those companies. After we did the project, we concluded, and so in the pharma supply chain, the prototype was actually really good, was really nicely implemented as well, and we saw a potential to overcome these supply chain challenges, and because it was in Hyperledger Fabric, also scaling seems feasible. So in our view, a really promising project. For the label supply chain, we also saw that Ethereum worked, but it's a bit slow, and since you need to pay transaction fees, can also be quite expensive if you need to pay for every stake, maybe 10 cents. So that was a bit questionable, but also this prototype in our view has the potential to overcome some of the challenges in supply chains, but the scaling seems a bit challenging. So we are researchers, so we always want, or we like to do research projects. So of course we ask both companies whether we can or whether they would like to do a follow-up project. And to our surprise, the pharma supply chain said, no, thanks, that was nice, but it's okay for us. And the label supply chain, so the regional label said, yeah, let's do that, seems cool, let's go forward with this. So this was at the beginning a bit puzzling for us. We have some intuition why this could be the case, which also fools some of our future research. So if we compare the two different companies, or the label and the pharma company, we see they differ in some of the aspects. So the pharma is typical corporation, so to say. It's hierarchical structured, it's multinational. The supply chain partners are large enterprises, and of course they want to make profit as every company. And their USP is really the price and the quality of their products. The label, however, is the situation looks quite different. It's local by definition. They are a regional label. There are many independent actors, so you have really small firms that are producing. You have farmers, butchers, and so on that would interact with this platform. So many individuals, SMEs, and what's also interesting is that the label is already structured as an association. So they have an umbrella organization on top of them, and there is some loose governance in place. And their USP is actually transparency. So they want to be transparent, such that customers that buy these products in the Migros, for example, can be sure that they really buy a regional product. So those two hint a bit towards why the Pharma didn't want to continue. Also what Michael said before, they have there are power structures and they have information advantage that they probably don't want to give up, whereas the label, regional label, really want to be transparent. So, and that led to Innosuisse pre-study, which Michael will tell you something about.
Yes, exactly. So we started over again with the regional label, with this label supply chain, and started again to really look into deep what actually are the problems in the certification process. We saw there that it's complicated to trace, as Florian said already. The communication is insufficient when you are here. Data are still in silos, so they had to copy and scan and sign and send by fax or mail again information and data. Standardization of files were not really done. It was not clear how to store them. Some were stored papers, others were storing digital files. Then the audit process itself was done by an external auditor. And they also were not really cost efficient. They had to come by to every location. They are still looking into the papers sometimes, so not digital. They really want to ask, let me show me your delivery notes you have from your customers, or where you have from your suppliers. So that can produce, in our opinion, quite a lot of searching costs for documents. So you see, what we needed is at the end a solution which would guarantee the traceability, the unification, and the reduction of redundancies in the process, and mainly also make it more simple. Other additional requirements were sure. It's always about security and privacy. How you can guarantee that? It's nobody wants, if it's going to the end, that it won't everybody can see everything. So this is also a little bit tricky stuff many times if you talk about blockchain. So Ethereum wouldn't be any more a solution that everybody would see everything, especially also because one botcher don't want to see that the other botcher knows exactly, and so on. You know, that all this kind of business secrets stuff. So, but nevertheless, we started to create some simplified ideas where we would like to start with. We had two processes actually in this regional pre-study. You have a registration process, which is the first one. So there you start to register a new producer. So, for example, a farmer would like to certify his meat or his product. Then he would call the certification at the label company and would tell them, yeah, can I be also registered? And then the process would start with many documents. It can be up to 7 to 10 documents they need, depends a little bit on the situation. So they have to fill out these documents, and these documents need to be signed by up to between 5 to 7 companies. Depends a little bit. I know it's an umbrella certification body. Then you have the auditor. Then you have the regional label. Then you have the supplier. Then you have the producer itself, the licensee. Maybe you have a subcontractor between also the process. So you have to really sign these documents, and this means that many times this is hard copies. So you send it by A-post, or you send it by scans, and then they have to print it and sign it again and scan it again. So sure, it would be nice to have a system where all these documents, let's say a decentralized system where all these documents are shared and can be digitally viewed, signed, submitted, and stored, and so on. Because also storage all of these 5 to 7 entities, they will store their own documentation, and they have to constantly update them. If there is coming a new document in with a new signature in it, they have to erase the old one and store the new one. So quite a complicated process, which needs a lot of time for them, and they were eager to have here let's say a known system which can be easily handled. The second process is then once a producer or a licensee is registered, then it is about to trace and track and trace the value chain and the products within the supply chain. Here, once again, the question would be how to bring all this information in one decentralized system, because currently there is not just such a system. Let's say if you were here the spoon producer, he can only see what is coming here with the delivery note, but he would not see what is actually here behind. So he don't see this delivery note from the wood. So to be honest, he wouldn't actually know if the wood he's buying here, he wouldn't actually know if this wood is really coming from a tree which is from the region. So there, which is a bit the problem. And this is not only with the woods, it's also with the meat and with the cheese and so on and so on. You don't need to necessarily know where is coming the original product behind the first tier supplier. So there, the idea was that we would create a decentralized system where everybody in the whole system would actually, on the whole supply chain, would actually upload the delivery note, so you can track and trace it back. For sure, you need to link that together, but this is one of the requirements we would have to need. So when we look into a stakeholder analysis, we ask them how would you participate or how interested you are in such a decentralized solution. We were realizing that actually only, let's say, the umbrella organization and the regional label itself was really interested to find a solution here, high interest, and also they are important for the process. Others, let's say also the licensees and the producer, they were at the end not so much interested in it, because for them it would mean that they would have much more efforts. Because currently they don't need to track it, they don't need to trace all that. For them, it's enough to provide a paper with saying that yes, this wood or this timber or this raw material is coming from a regional producer or supplier, but much more not. And that's they have to provide every second year. So they don't have to provide on every product level to really show, okay, yes, this product is built by or is coming from raw material from the region. So for them, it would be much more effort. So that's why they were not really eager, and their interest is quite low to have here a new system. But you see also they are really important for such a system that it's working, because they would be the one who are providing the information. Same as a little bit we saw in the certification body as in the auditor, which are an external company. So for them, it seems that they're not really interested to make a process much easier, more transparent. What is the reason? We don't really know, because we couldn't really make some deep interviews with them. It seems like for them it's also convenient how the process is currently. So they have to go to every producer and look through the documents. For sure, it's quite cost intensive, and it seems like it's their business. Consumer, apparently, when you look into studies, what is the consumer saying? Also here, the consumer is not so much interested in, generally spoken, to have a higher transparency. For them, it's enough if there is the label on a package, they trust the label, they believe in this label. So if there is saying it's from the region, they just trust that this is from the region, and they wouldn't be. So it seems like from studies, they wouldn't be eager to know more about it, and for sure they wouldn't be ready to pay more, because, what I said, at the end of the day, it costs more such a system than the situation as it is now, and so it was not clear who will actually bear all these costs. For sure, not the consumer. Retailers, yes, they have some interest because they would like to have the visibility. But yeah, they were not, in our case, they were not so important, because it was more the umbrella organization who was here managing this. And if you look into the retailers, they're currently also building up such track and trace systems, especially because, but that's more because of their supply chain towers they're building. So they are more interested that the others are providing them all the data. If you look like this, and they are then the owner of this tower. So they were not so much interested into building up a blockchain-based distributed system. So what is actually the outcome of the pre-study we made? You see that in the first case, we realized that because there were 5 to 7 trusted parties involved, there is no need for a blockchain, because you can do that with conventional system, to just a conventional shared document file system or something, because you actually trust each other. It's not that you don't trust and you believe that he's faking a signature or something. It's more an issue of creating an efficient shared data file. On the part, which is the track and trace, there we saw that the blockchain is not really wanted, because, as I say, the blockchain would create much more effort than it's now. The transparency seems not to be required or requested by consumer or by somebody who pays it. And also this whole supply chain is not, as there are many small companies involved, they don't have a huge budget, which is just available for innovation for the innovation's sake. So there we saw also again that, blockchain most probably is not the real help for them. And so the case is closed. Florian, you want to have further talk?
So now I will talk a bit about future research. That's what our research path has led to. We saw that in the beginning, when we looked at the 2 different prototypes, one of the label was very happy to go forward, and we also looked at this table showing the different structure of the companies. So what we thought, or what we started to realize, is that I'm trying to go to the next slide. Thanks. That's probably the setting of these companies plays a major role. So this will be our new research field. It's actually something many people are trying to work a bit on, so-called blockchain governance. This has many different layers. So you have ecosystems such as the Trust Square, for example, which is an innovation ecosystem, hosting different companies or organizations that act in blockchain projects. Or you have consortia, which firms together that try to build up blockchain solutions. So this is the off-chain part. Originally, blockchain had the vision that all these decisions should be somehow, so for example, decision how to develop the platform and about system parameters and so on, should be taken on-chain or should be implemented within a protocol. But even with Bitcoin and also other cryptocurrencies, but even more with blockchain applications and company applications, this whole governance shifts towards the off-chain domain. So if you have a consortium, for example, you need to define rules, who is involved in the consensus, who can, for example, allow new members, how can new members join, how are we going to take decisions to develop the platform, how do we deal with our customers, are the customers involved in some kind of voting, for example. So many of the original, or a lot of the original vision to just do it on-chain has now shifted a bit to the off-chain domain. And there are quite many interesting questions how these 2 levels off-chain and on-chain are interrelated regarding the question of governance, whether the one influences the other. And there we plan to hand in an SNF proposal together with the University of Zurich, with Professor Claudio Tesone and the University of Zurich Blockchain Center, to really gather some data about on the governance on the on-chain level and also the off-chain level, and to analyze this data, devise some mechanisms to feed it back to the system again to improve this governance aspect. Then another line of research is that we want to look into blockchain projects that have been conducted, also proof of concept and so on, and try to identify different factors different success factors that are necessary such that a project can succeed. So governance might be one thing of it, but also maybe whether the development was done in-house or somewhere, or a startup helped, or so on. There we are at the moment at devising such a large-scale survey to identify different success factors across different industries. And the third one is actually also quite surprising. If you remember the Pharma company, that they didn't want to do a follow-up project, but maybe 2 or 3 months ago, we came in contact again with them, and we had quite a long meeting and brainstorm session. And they now have one problem, one area driven by regulation that could benefit from blockchain. The idea is to facilitate the handling of different certificates they need along their supply chain. So this is also a bit a learning from us that even though, for example, in the label case, they somehow need transparency. Currently, the benefit of a blockchain solution guaranteeing this transparency is not enough, such that it is worth to put all this additional effort that would have been needed from the producers. So that's why we had to stop this project. But here, as soon as you have some regulatory pressure, such projects, such blockchain solutions become interesting again. But this project is quite at the beginning. We don't know yet whether or where this will lead us to. So now Michael will tell you two other activities we are involved.
Yes, thanks. Yes, actually, we are currently running an expert group in a so-called national theme network, which is supported by the Innosuisse, again, where we meet 4 times a year. We'll see if in Corona times that's the same, but generally spoken before. 4 times a year between academic and industry partners to see where we stay in blockchain, and specifically blockchain in supply chain management. Next, what we do also together now with that Zentrum is the following part, which is Innosuisse for 2021. They are now have a new innovation system. This is called the Innovation Booster. And there we are now applying for such a boost with decentralized value chains, where we will also try to boost actually innovation in Switzerland, specifically in blockchain and in decentralized value chains. There it's also about to founding projects directly with up to 25,000 Swiss francs, And we have such topics like self-sovereign identity, economy of things and services, or cross-organizational processes, which we will look into, and looking forward that we get approved. So there we are at the end and open for questions.
So also here you get another form of applause. Usually you would have all the participants giving you a big hand. From my side, thank you very much. It was super interesting, and I wrote like 4 pages in my notebook with remarks and a few questions that I have as well that I'd like to pose. I would suggest that we go through the F&As which were posted during the talk first, and then to all the audience, if you have a question, now would be the time to raise your hand so that we can basically give you the mic and put your audio on so you can pose your question and discuss it with our 2 experts from ZHAW here. So maybe going through the questions that were posed during the lecture, we have one: how are label monetizing transparency, as first question. I don't know if Florian or Michael, you want to take it?
Yeah, I can quickly talk about it. It's monetizing is maybe the wrong word, but it's about that they can there. But why a label is actually there? Why a label is existing? What are they promising us? They're promising us somehow that the product is actually from one region. So it is about trust, that we have to trust them, that they have an overview and they know from where are the products coming. They are certifying. And that's why they are creating somehow transparency to us, in the sense of that because a label, because a product has a label, it's transparent to us that it's coming from a certain region. Okay, in this sense, we mean transparency. At the end of the day, they're anyway non-profit. Actually, many of them, they need support by the government or by the region, in the sense of that they're not really like making money. So that's not they're not really a business behind. So it's not if you want to make a business, you don't make a label. It's more about that they try to promote the region. It's mostly also related to tourism, to supporting certain region. So there are many times they're paid by cantons or even lower communities.
Interesting to hear that. I would say that we can jump to the 3rd question, which is a bit in the same direction, probably from the same person. There's no name with it. So surprised to see that for consumers, there's no need for transparency. I think that is related to the label project as well, where at the end you had to see that there is no interest in further developing this project. Might be the stakeholder analysis that you showed.
Yeah, it was somehow surprising for us the same. So we were also, when we started the project, we said, yeah, sure, you can make money out of it by providing higher transparency. But at the end of the day, we realized that many consumers are actually not asking for that. So we didn't make a big research into that, to be honest. So it was not our goal to really look into how consumers see the label market, or how they see the like, let's say, the regional label in specifically. We did make a huge survey there, but what we saw from other surveys, mainly also from a study from the University of Zurich regarding milk, we are realizing there that many times the consumer, if they're saying it's Swiss milk, well, why I need more to know? They trust these labels, and it's in Switzerland at least now. I don't know if it's in China or Asia different, but at least in Switzerland, the same with the regional label. If the people are trusting actually these labels, they are completely right on that. I'm not saying we should mistrust them. We didn't see anything that we can say like, oh, we should not trust them anymore. But so there would be maybe some fun effect that they say, yeah, nice to have a scanner where we can scan of it. First of all, the next question would be if they would really appreciate if it's based on blockchain. So that's the next step. I mean, even if they would have a scanner and just scan a QR code or a barcode, and there is some tracking there, I mean, who knows if that's really blockchain or not? I mean, for them, it's the same anyway. So we don't see that there is like such a mistrust into the label that you would say, yeah, you need something like really a decentralized system which has this high trust level. Otherwise, you will not, you cannot create this transparency. And then finally, we don't see that the customer will be willing to pay for it, in the sense of that you can ask for more money just because you can provide him this transparency. That's at the end the question. Okay, I have all the effort to create transparency with a system, so somebody has to pay for it. And who is paying it? At the end, it must be the consumer, because nobody else will pay for it. Just so the consumer would have to pay for it by, for example, buying only the product because it's saying it's blockchain proofed, or by buying only this product because now he trusts and before he was not trusting. So you see there, we don't see that there is a lot into, at least for Swiss labels.
Yeah, it's interesting what you're sharing. We made some similar experiences. You mentioned this University Zurich project in the milk value chain. And based on that, the question was, and I think it's always when it's about transparency in the supply chain, yeah, who's going to pay for this additional effort? And the additional effort can be held very low in an implementation of a well-functioning system, can be very automated as well, but there is initial effort that needs to be invested into building such a system. And the question always arises, yeah, who's going to pay for it? We concluded at that time that it might be interesting to add an information layer on top of the products that you see if certain sustainability actions have been deployed, and even connect a payment stream on top of it, so that people would be willing not to pay for the, let's say, the blockchain label or blockchain certificate, but they would be willing to pay for something that is produced in a sustainable way. Nevertheless, also this project is on hold and still looking for somebody from the industry that thinks, okay, yeah, I'm willing to put down the initial investment, which is just needed in order to get such a project running. So I see that there is one more question or a follow-up from somebody in the audience saying that he's surprised to see that for customers, there's no need for transparency. Would you care to elaborate on this a little bit? Or, I mean, I can also quickly share something from the milk project that we did. Basically, that one survey there showed that people would trust the local brand so much that the branding was enough. So that's my 5 cents on this. Maybe Michael, you can add.
No, it's exactly that. At least in Switzerland. I mean, and there we are where we made the study. I don't know globally spoken, and in China you read. That's why maybe you read much more about food supply chains on blockchain from Asia, because people are really not trusting there as they trust here. So maybe for a reason. I'm not that much into these details, but at least here in Switzerland, because they generally they trust these labels. So as long as you can trust them and you don't have any need that you don't no reason why you shouldn't trust, that's why maybe you don't seek for more transparency, and especially if this transparency comes at a cost. There's
a great initiative from the Modum team as well. It's the company called ProveX, which basically tries to prove that the product is Swiss made with the information that is already around. And I think for these applications, there is a market, as you mentioned, proving that something is Swiss made in Asia has a value, whereas proving it here just doesn't. We don't have that much of a problem, as far as I know, with fakes or forgeries. So I think that one is good. Okay, let's go to the first question. What sorts of inputs you have used to track and trace and connect with the blockchain? That was also one question that I had. I think that's based on the prototype you build. And there it's not, from my perspective, also not clear how did the data get into the blockchain. Did you use a smartphone application? Whereas in the pharma case, it was very clear. You had the Raspberry Pi, which basically was transporting information from the real world into your backend, which then did that, put that onto the blockchain system. Maybe Florian, you can take this one.
Sure, I can take this one. Yes, I mean, the two prototypes I showed, those were really just proof of concepts. And so the data input there was basically manually. So we didn't set up, there was no interface with the, I mean, in the pharma case, with the pharma company's information system, but also for the regional label. In the regional label, we had the idea that we would, because there are different parties, maybe with different, let's say, IT capacities. So the idea there was to have an app to source this data for example, from a farmer, and if possible, of course, you could program an interface to an information system. For a bigger company. But in our proof of concepts, we did it mostly manually. I think also, if I may go to the next question that's probably related, it's always a bit the question of the input or let's say the interface to the physical world that you have. Of course, you cannot have 100% trust in the sense that if garbage in, then there is garbage in the system. But at least if you can track the information through the supply chain, you get an immutable history. And there are some good data sources that you could use in the regional label case, for example, for cows. The earmarks of cows, so the numbering are registered in the database in the Swiss governmental database, which you could use as the first input to bring this cow into life in the blockchain. Yes, Michael, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, and exactly. The logic is also that you have, when you have several suppliers, in a supply chain, several parties, that they somehow check each other. Then, so if you want to fake a product, you would need much more to involve much more parties. It's not possible to fake. Even one is faking a raw material, the other one would have to buy this faked raw material somehow. So it's not anymore that easy, because you would need to have more like a conspiracy between several parties. That's also that they double check each other and they have to confirm that, and it's written then, and you cannot say no, I didn't know anymore. It's also that a little bit an issue, or that we could solve a little, let's say a little bit, to make it a more complicated to fake stuff than it is now. Or it's still possible. We won't say it's not possible anymore, but it would be a bit harder and would need more criminal energy, let's say.
Yeah, I think that's always the case in building secure systems. It's impossible to build a system which can't be overcome or can't be tricked, but you make it more expensive for people to fake information.
Yeah, and more visible.
Fantastic.
Who actually faked them? If later you see that it was fake, then you can really say, but it's here in this step or whatever. You know exactly who was involved.
Yeah, I think this is where the more visibility we have into supply chains and the more data that is around, the better we are in monitoring what is happening and understanding as well where fake products are introduced, where suppliers are not holding their promises or having bad products introduced into the supply chain, and with that creating a better system for all members of the value chain, as well as for the consumer who at the end gets the end product and needs to deal with it. We have a good mention about a great initiative from Digital Asset Group, I guess, creating a smart contract with DAML. I quickly Googled that because I didn't know about it. It's apparently a programming language to write decentralized applications in it. Florian, do you know it?
Yes, I think they are even based in Zurich, if I'm not wrong.
Digital Asset Group is an international company. They have their headquarters in the States, and they have an office in Zurich, in Altstetten, actually. Yeah. Haven't heard about this project. I heard about a fantastic project from Provenance doing exactly the same. They used mass balances at the end to make sure that fish was tracked throughout the supply chain. You can say that it was sourced through organic or sustainable fishers in Southeast Asia. Good.
Then my question would be more like, what system is actually behind Provenance? But okay, that's another question. And we know also about the project of OpenCS. This is also from WWF and Boston Consulting Group, which is tracking tuna fish in I think in Australia. I mean, just to have an idea, I mean, a little bit, I was looking into that, but not too deep. But also there, first of all, it's permission blockchain. OpenCS somehow, is provided by them. Second, it needs quite a lot of technical support because the tuna is fished and then they have to put an RFID tag on the fish. And additionally, then you say, yeah, but how do you know if this is really fish from there? So they need to see the GPS signal. And then you say, and how do you don't know that they fish? And then they run into with the boat in the right direction, in the right region, and then they put the signal on it. No, then we have cameras on the boat. So you see, it's quite a lot. Then you have to analyze the cameras on the boat. If the fisher was really putting the tag on the fish when it was fished and not running or fishing it outside the region where they should fish, and then driving back and putting the tag on it when he was in the region. So you see, if there is criminal energy, I mean, most probably we always find ways to cheat on it. And then the question is how much effort you want to spend to avoid that, and if somebody's paying at the end for that, because it's quite a lot of effort to do all this tracing and tracking. And once again, at the end of the day, it must be the consumer who is paying that, in my opinion, because if at the end I'm going to the shop and I see, okay, this is tuna fished by OpenCS tracking system, but costs, I don't know, 1 franc more or 2 francs more. Will I buy this at the end, the consumer, or he will buy the other one who is just an MSC label on it or so? I will see there is the trade-off you have to make. And at least in Switzerland, for Swiss labels, let's say, for Swiss products, that's what we saw. I think the effort to do all that is at the moment, at least, not needed. Something else is, and there it's coming again, the Pharma point of view, or the Pharma perspective. If you have a regulation who is saying you need to do that, otherwise you will not have anymore the license to work or to provide your medicines or to provide your product, then they are completely forced to by regulations. And there where it's coming again interesting, and there it's also where the money lies then. So they are interested to innovate, to find new solutions, to be more efficient in complying with these regulations. So there it's not anymore the consumer who is actually the one who is pushing, but it's the regulation. There we see, let's say, more use of this in this kind of for this kind of system, because it's the money there and it's the pressure there to find solutions in comparison to maybe food, let's say.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It's very similar to the initial use case we're following at Modum, which was basically regulatory driven. I think the whole pharma supply chain is regulatory driven. Also, investment into operations, when you look at the pharma sector, are really small. They're rather innovating on the compounds, on the drug itself, and not that much in their whole operative sector. So if there is pressure, and pressure has to come from regulatory bodies, they're willing to move, and that's great. I'm very surprised, and very surprised. I think it's very nice that you have a follow-up with the pharma company after at the beginning. It seemed like that wasn't a fit, and also on this, I noted that down. I really liked how you tried to explain that these decentralized systems need to match the company's DNA. So if there's no willingness for transparency, or if there's by default a very hierarchical mindset around that, it's difficult to bring this decentralized idea across. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on that, or do you have more data points already found in this direction?
Maybe I can take that. So no, not yet. This is our current, or just those are our observations that we wanted to share with you after we did those 2 prototypes. But that's one thing we also want to study with this research line on the key success factors. So what is exactly the impact of the company's environment, of the organization itself, how it is structured, and their business model, and so on possible blockchain applications and blockchain implementations within supply chains, but also a bit broader in cross-organizational processes. But so we don't have yet hard facts. That is just those were just observations that we had.
It's super interesting. I'm very looking forward to the findings of that next project. Now we have an interesting remark again.
Yeah, just one also to add on. I mean, what you know from supply chain from supply chain research, that to sharing information in supply chain, which are quite hierarchical organized, the information exchange is much more difficult than in supply chain, which are really, let's say, equal. Everybody is equal. So that's maybe a little bit also from there we could take the hypothesis that hierarchical system are not that much looking into blockchain, because as I said, there it's more than most. We move into the other 2 system where you have a supply chain tower, which is controlled by one, because this focal company, who is actually the one who is dealing with all the supply chain and has more power than the others, is most probably not so willing to give up this power.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question on that. I noted this when you presented the supply chain tower problem. Is there any mechanism how to get these systems also onboarded into decentralized version of their supply chain towers? I mean, if one could motivate the big player to sort of put their towers not in their own information system, but put that outside into a system which can be accessed by everybody they're working with, I mean, then you would have to convince actually only one party and would get the decentralized system as a result.
Good question. Most probably, I mean, easy one is to say that yes, they need to have a benefit out of it. And there is most probably the question of interoperability, and as far as you can understand, how far you can create some standards, globally standards, where they actually benefit at the end by using these standards, or by using this globally connected, let's say, globally connected systems. I don't know. If you look into Novartis, where they're looking now into, or so, it's a little use case, but it's there where they want to open their system for broad access, And to make this broad access viable, let's say maybe they're looking more into systems like a blockchain-based system or decentralized system, because they don't want to open their servers, because that's also too risky then. So maybe somewhere there where they really want to share data and bring them globally available, but they don't want to do that from their own system on. So they want to use some distributed systems or standards.
Thank you very much. So we have one question concerning the Corona crisis, which I find very interesting. If one has already considered using a blockchain system for the verification of people with COVID-19. I've read about a few prototypes. I think one was in Singapore, where they have contact tracing, which doesn't involve a blockchain, but which is very smartly done through Bluetooth and through cryptography. Any ideas or comments on this? Maybe Florian, from a technical point of view, if it would make sense to use blockchain infrastructure to track COVID-19 infected or people that are now with antibodies?
Good question. I haven't thought about that. But I also think it's interesting. So the idea is that you would register maybe a certificate for people that had already COVID-19 and now have antibodies. Yeah, I mean, you could do that. The question is whether you should do that. Maybe if the state would provide something like that, then you wouldn't need a blockchain for that. However, maybe you could think that if this is an international solution, then it could really make sense to do that on a blockchain, such that you could work in other countries as well. And then no one can take this certificate away from you. It's there and you can prove it. So
there, Malik, it starts with what we talk about, a digital identity, and then it must be self-sovereign. And there we are in the topic where it's quite interesting again, So you need somehow then how I can prove that that's me. Yeah. Just the digital identity, self-sovereign identity, all that is then somehow the base for creating such ideas. Because for sure the government can build that because they have our identity. They have also this digital somehow because it's somewhere in their server. It's there, so they can provide us such a service, and it's quite efficient if we trust the state. Let's say once again in Germany, where they talk about, or also Switzerland or South Korea, you talked about. No, there it's maybe you trust the state, so you will also maybe provide this data or provide them the ability to track you or to these certificates. But maybe in other countries you don't want to do that. And then you would need a digital self-sovereign identity where you could upload this kind of certificates proved by, for example, the university, hospital, or by another certified again by another recognized company. Because otherwise, I can provide myself a certificate that I had coronavirus, and once again, you would need also that. You would have to find the situation where who you can trust again, who is certifying me that I have had the virus. So that must be also again legally, or it must be officially stated, and so on. There, I can think it's quite interesting to use blockchain. But once again, you need digital identities. First, from every person. Second, of every company who is providing this service or these certificates now.
So to maybe answer the question that the blockchain technology might be a part of the solution, if for the core, probably there are other technologies that are needed. I mean, for the verification of people, that would make sense, actually. It would make sense with self-sovereign identity. That's fantastic there. So we answered that one as well. Pascal gave us a few remarks. I think as well that Pascal is able to talk, so you can try that and see how that feels in our little group here. Don't be shy. Nobody's gonna bite you.
No mic.
No mic. All right. All right. So good links for Ethereum blockchain. For that's from EY, Nightfall Protocol. Never heard of that. But for private transaction on the Ethereum blockchain using ZK snarks, sounds interesting. Did you build that, Pascal? So I think the thanks is okay. And then we have a more remark. All right, so if I understand the two protocols correctly is to make Ethereum a valid option for enterprise solutions, which is very interesting because, I mean, if we look at blockchain infrastructures at the moment, we have Ethereum, which is very well developed, has a huge community, but from a technical point of view, is probably not the latest technology. And then we have a lot of different, let's say, Ethereum killer, which just don't have the community yet. Fantastic.
I think, Malik, there was a question also from RPS regarding how you can demonstrate the proof that you have the antibodies. And I mean, maybe I was not clear. I think there, yes, again, you need, again, trusted hospitals or trusted labors at the end, because otherwise you cannot prove on your own that you had it. But there you will need to trust, again, some labors. Yeah, there most probably that's what would be the solution. And to whom you can trust and not, I don't know who is saying that. Once again, maybe again the state. Yeah, so you need like state-approved labors or hospitals who can prove that you had that you have the antibodies. So I see that, but I'm not so much in this technique. So I don't know if you could use a self-test who is then proving you. Maybe also, I don't know, technically.
Yeah. That would be interesting, having a self-test with a self-sovereign identity at the end, then logging the result directly into a blockchain. Might even solve the Oracle problem. So if I go through the questions, I think we answered most of them. And if I go through my notes, I think I also don't have any more remarks. I don't know if from our participants, I mean, we're still at almost 20 that are around. If there is still anything that you would like to ask our experts here, I mean, now is the chance. I mean, I have a question to both of you. How are you handling the current Corona crisis? I mean, both of you give lectures at ZHAW and have different meetings. I'm curious of how you are handling this and how your daily work is affected by it.
Yeah, I can start maybe. So yeah, many conference calls, and of course also the teaching is digital. Luckily, I think we were quite early and planned. I think we started to plan maybe one day before the Swiss Federal Council announced that all schools will be closed. So we were prepared, and etc. Even suspended the lectures for 1 week, so we really had our time to set up everything. And I think now it's working quite well. Also, the feedback of the students is good. I think everyone is arranging with this situation, and yeah, that works.
Yeah, same to me. I believe after for sure some weekends full working on digitalization, all the stuff. I think it's also a great opportunity for all of us to see it on the positive way. Let's say it was forcing, at least from our side of work, to think really digital again. Because we were talking about it since years. Let's say how we can be that the studies are digital, how you can do that, how we could be, but it's not working. You know, all these spots you hear then, and then you get forced to. You have no other way, and within a week you have to find solution. You have to be creative. You have to just do your best, even maybe you know it's not the best, but I mean, you cannot do other things. You just have to, run. Yeah, it's somehow from this crisis you can learn also to be again just flexible, agile, try things out, and most probably also this opportunity, because everybody will understand if something's not really working. Yeah, I mean, anybody knows we are all sitting in the same boat. So I really appreciate that from this side. Beside, for sure, there are complications, things like be at home, kids at home, wife at home, everybody at home. It's not always the easiest situation, but you learn again. I think we should take the chance and learn. And I believe, at least from work, from the universities, I think we learned a lot, and we will not go back. I don't believe. I hope at least we will not go back where we were before. I think we will keep some element of this digital element. We will keep, and this makes it more interesting for students, for all participants. And though I think if we really take the chance, we make a loop forward in what's digitalization. And I believe also in work. And many are now forced to make homework, to make home office. So I believe many companies are realizing now that actually it's possible, because before they were maybe arguing why it's not possible. And now they see that it is possible and it's working. And so I believe many employees will be at the end more at home later.
Yeah, this is also why we decided to hold this lecture series in such a format. I would still argue that being all together in a room would be a different experience. Nevertheless, for me, it was a lot of fun to, on one side, hear this lecture and have it on my screen as well. Like I could really focus well and could take notes very efficiently. And on the other hand, having this discussion with questions popping in and the whole setup. So it was a lot of fun from my perspective.
No, I completely agree with you. I mean, but what you see, for example, here, just remark from RPS again, you have another chance to reach the audience from completely other regions. Now, it's not anymore just Zurich. It's again the global audience, and I think that's also for university a huge opportunity to reach really people you cannot reach with a conventional delivery. And I don't say that the conventional one is dead, but I think we just should open up the horizon and think about to use both, because it's really, you can make the globe also smaller in one kind. But I'm completely agree with you. There's many things you still need to do in person. It's not possible to do everything over internet and video.
Yeah, definitely. On the other hand, I mean, yeah, I think it's possible. Then still, the experience is a different one. Also, now with like this final words, we'd probably gather all together, have a little more beers, and basically let the let the evening pass. But now I would say thank you to our two speakers, Michael Lustenberger and Florian Spychiger from ZHAW. Thank you, Trustsquare, for hosting us, also not in the physical space at Paradeplatz, but on Zoom. The setup worked like a charm. And then thank you to all the participants. It was great to have you here. We had some nice discussions. And for me, it was, as I mentioned before, a lot of fun to be part of this first digital lecture series. I wrote that and said that at the beginning. Follow Trust Square on the social media accounts, as well as subscribe to the newsletter, and you will be informed about next events and the next lecture series. So we are looking to have somebody interesting speaking in April, May as well. I think that format here works very well. So if there is no more closing remarks, I would say that's it. And thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And now, as I say, everybody drink his own beer. There it's missing. Thanks a lot, Malik. Thanks a lot, Trust Square. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Luke.
Thank you.